In the vast, lonely expanses of the Pacific Ocean, July 1974 is a month of deceptive calm. Beneath an infinite sky, a unique vessel moves across the waves. It's not a warship, nor a pleasure cruiser. It is the Hughes Glomar Explorer, a strange and ungainly apparition, a clumsy giant whose stated purpose is as ambitious as it is peculiar: to pioneer a new era of deep-sea mining, extracting valuable manganese nodules from the ocean floor, thousands of meters below. The operation is financed by the world's most enigmatic billionaire, Howard Hughes, a man whose reputation for audacious and secretive projects is the only plausible explanation for such a colossal undertaking. Nearby, Soviet surveillance ships watch with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Their crews study the American vessel's every move, trying to decipher the mystery of its mission. Aboard the Glomar Explorer, tension is another passenger, as real as the smell of salt and machinery. Every glance from the Soviets is a reminder that they are not alone. But the true story is hidden beneath the surface, far beyond the sight of any spy. There was no mining. There were no manganese nodules. Nearly 5 kilometers below them, in absolute darkness where the pressure would crush a military submarine like a tin can, a giant mechanical claw, concealed within the ship's belly, was slowly closing around a prize far more valuable than any mineral: the Soviet nuclear submarine K-129, with all its secrets, its atomic missiles, and the bodies of its crew. The world was watching a mining operation, but the CIA was about to commit the greatest heist in history. It all began in the frozen silence of the Cold War, in March 1968. The K-129, a Soviet Golf II-class submarine, was a silent predator, a nuclear guardian patrolling the depths of the Pacific. It was a key piece in the Soviet Union's arsenal, carrying 3 ballistic missiles with atomic warheads, each capable of incinerating a city. But on an unnamed day that month, the K-129 simply vanished. It ceased communications, disappeared from tracking screens. It became a ghost. The Soviet Navy, alarmed and desperate, launched one of the most massive search operations in naval history. Dozens of ships and aircraft scoured thousands of square kilometers of ocean, a frantic hunt to find their lost guardian. But they found nothing. Not an oil slick, not a single piece of debris. The Pacific had swallowed the K-129 without a trace, and for Moscow, the location of its submarine and its nuclear secrets became an unfathomable mystery. But where the Soviets found only silence, the United States had ears. Hidden beneath the waves, the UIS. Navy operated a secret and sophisticated network known as SOSUS, the Sound Surveillance System. It was a web of highly sensitive hydrophones placed at strategic points on the ocean floor, designed to listen for the subtle sounds of Soviet submarines. And that network had heard something. It had caught the whisper of a catastrophe, the unmistakable sound of an implosion, a ghostly echo coming from the deep. Naval intelligence analysts triangulated the signal. With astonishing precision, they located the disaster site about 2,500 kilometers northwest of Hawaii. They dispatched the submarine USS Halibut, a vessel specializing in secret operations, to confirm their suspicions. Equipped with cutting-edge technology, the Halibut arrived at the location and, after weeks of painstaking search in the abyssal darkness, found the wreckage. There, at a depth of nearly 5,000 meters, lay the K-129, broken in 2 on the seabed. A graveyard of steel and secrets, crushed by a pressure of over 7,000 pounds per square inch. For the CIA, the news was a lightning bolt in the dark. The K-129 wasn't just a wreck, it was a time capsule, an intelligence goldmine beyond their wildest dreams. Inside were the code books that could unlock every Soviet naval secret, torpedoes with advanced designs, and most importantly, 3 R-21 nuclear missiles. Analyzing that technology could give the United States a decisive edge in the arms race. The opportunity was unique, but the challenge was monumental. Almost godlike. How to salvage a submarine from the bottom of the ocean at a depth man had never reached for such an operation, and do it in total secrecy, right under the enemy's nose. The idea that emerged from the agency's boldest minds was as brilliant as it was insane. Project Azorian. They wouldn't attempt a partial recovery. They would go for the whole thing. They would build a ship capable of lifting a section weighing thousands of tons from the abyss. But an operation of that magnitude couldn't be hidden. They needed a cover story, A front so grand and convincing it would deflect all suspicion. They needed a smokescreen so brilliant it would blind the entire world. And for that, they turned to the man who was himself a living myth, Howard Hughes. The billionaire, aviator, filmmaker, and engineer was by then a recluse, a ghost who communicated with the world through memos. His reputation for investing in extravagant and nearly impossible technological projects made him the perfect disguise. If anyone in the world was going to spend a fortune on a wild venture like deep-sea mining, it would be Howard Hughes. He was the perfect ghost to hide a ghost operation. The plan was set in motion with surgical precision. The CIA, through intermediaries, approached Hughes, who, as a patriot and former government contractor, agreed to lend his name and corporate empire to the cause. The official story was born. Hughes's company, Summa Corporation, would lead a revolutionary expedition to extract manganese nodules from the Pacific floor. The narrative was so compelling it generated genuine interest in the international community. Nations began to debate deep-sea mining rights. The CIA hadn't just created a cover story. It had created a new global gold rush as a distraction. While the world discussed minerals, in a Pennsylvania shipyard, the true tool of the heist began to take shape. The construction of the Hughes Glomar Explorer was a marvel of secret engineering, at a cost that, in today's money, would exceed $5 billion. The ship was a beast of steel designed for a single, dark purpose. Inside, there was no mining equipment. Instead, a moon pool was built, a gigantic opening in the center of the hull, large enough to house a structure the size of a building. This moon pool was a portal to the abyss, a hidden indoor dock that would allow the ship to lower and raise its secret cargo without anyone on the surface seeing it. And the cargo was even more impressive, a mechanical claw of titanic proportions, a multi-story steel monster codenamed Clementine. It wasn't a simple claw, it was a precision instrument designed to descend 5 kilometers, find the submarine in total darkness, grip it with the firmness of a surgeon, and slowly lift it into the hidden belly of the Glomar Explorer. The stage for the greatest heist in history was set. The genius disguised as a miner was about to set sail. In the summer of 1974, the Hughes Glomar Explorer, the most expensive floating lie ever built, arrived at its destination, the exact spot on the Pacific map where, 5 kilometers below, its prize awaited. The crew was a strange amalgam of the world's best deep-sea engineers and undercover CIA agents. Men who spoke the language of steel and men who spoke the language of silence, all bound by an oath of absolute secrecy and the immensity of the task before them. The operation began under the watchful eyes of the Soviet ships patrolling the area. From their bridges, Russian officers observed the strange American vessel with binoculars, logging its activity. They saw a drilling platform, heard the sounds of heavy machinery, but they couldn't see what was happening inside the hull. They couldn't see the moon pool opening like a wound in the ship's heart. They couldn't see Clementine, the colossal claw, beginning its slow, agonizing descent into the darkness. Lowering the claw was an odyssey in itself. It was connected to the ship by a nearly 5-kilometer-long drill pipe, a column of steel that had to be assembled piece by piece. Each 18-meter section of pipe was added with pinpoint precision. The process took days, a monotonous, high-stakes dance. A single mistake, a single faulty connection, and the multi-million-dollar claw would be lost forever in the abyss. The crew worked 12-hour shifts under unimaginable stress, knowing that history was being written, or erased, with every meter the claw descended. As Clementine sank, the world aboard the Glomar shrank. The only window to their progress was a screen showing the grainy images from the claw's cameras. They watched the surface light fade, saw blue turn to black, and witnessed the sea life become increasingly strange and alien. They descended through a silent, hostile universe, a place where the pressure was so extreme that water behaved differently, a realm no man had ever disturbed in this way. After more than a week of descent, it finally happened. On the screen, a ghostly shape emerged from the gloom. It was the K-129. The silence in the control room was absolute. There it was, the target of years of planning, billions of dollars, and incalculable geopolitical risk. It was a solemn and terrifying sight, a Cold War graveyard perfectly preserved in the cold and dark. The crew watched in reverent silence, aware they were looking at the tomb of nearly 100 enemy sailors. Now came the most delicate part. Using precision thrusters, the operators on the surface maneuvered Clementine over the forward section of the submarine, the part the CIA believed held the control room, the code books, and the nuclear torpedoes. It was like performing open-heart surgery from 5 kilometers away, using a robotic arm the size of a building. Inch by inch, the claw was positioned. Then, with excruciating slowness, the massive steel talons began to close. There was a soft crunch as the claw's metal made contact with the submarine's hull. For a moment that felt like an eternity, everyone held their breath. Then, the lights on the control panel turned green. They had a firm grip. Against all odds, against the laws of physics and probability, they had done it. Contact was made. The control room erupted in a murmur of relief and contained euphoria. They had caught the ghost. The slow process of lifting began. The journey back to the surface would be even more perilous than the descent. Now they were lifting not just the claw, but a dead weight of thousands of tons of Soviet steel, an unstable corpse that had been under extreme pressure for 6 years. The Glomar's engines groaned under the strain. The drill pipe creaked and moaned, enduring a tension that pushed it to the limits of its design. Day by day, meter by meter, the K-129 ascended from its tomb. The crew barely slept, monitoring every sensor, every pressure fluctuation, every anomalous sound. The tension on board was almost a physical force. They were on the verge of achieving the impossible, of pulling off the most audacious intelligence operation in history. The prize was almost in their grasp. And then, when the submarine had been lifted more than a mile from the seabed, still thousands of meters from the surface, disaster struck. Without warning, a dull, violent bang echoed through the Glomar Explorer's hull. It wasn't a sharp sound, but the deep, guttural moan of tortured metal giving way. In the control room, alarms blared and tension gauges plummeted. On the screen, the image shook violently. Several of the Clementine claw's talons, weakened by a metallurgical flaw no one had foreseen, had snapped. The grip was broken, as if in a slow-motion nightmare. The men in the control room watched in horror as the majority of the submarine broke away. About 2/3 of the section they were lifting, the most valuable section containing the sail, the missile room, and, most importantly, the code room, tore loose and began its final journey back into the darkness. It slipped from the broken claw and fell, tumbling into the blackness, disappearing from the camera's view in seconds. The heart of the beast, the intelligence treasure that had justified the entire operation, was lost forever, back in the abyss from which they had raised it. The mission, in that instant, became both a partial success and a catastrophic failure. The control room, which moments before had been electric with tense anticipation, fell deathly silent. They had brushed against greatness, only to have it slip through their fingers in a flash of fractured metal. But the real threat to Project Azorian didn't just come from the fragility of steel 5 kilometers down. It was brewing thousands of kilometers away, in a place that couldn't be more different from the lonely Pacific, the bustling city of Los Angeles. A month earlier, in June 1974, as the Glomar Explorer was sailing to its destination, a seemingly unrelated event took place. A group of burglars broke into the offices of Howard Hughes's Summa Corporation. It was a relatively minor robbery. The thieves were looking for cash and valuables, but in their search, they stumbled upon a safe containing confidential documents. Among them was a memo that would change the course of history. It was a short document, but its contents were pure dynamite. It detailed a request from Howard Hughes to the CIA for the agency to help him stop a former employee. The memo directly linked, in writing, the reclusive billionaire to the Central Intelligence Agency and, by extension, to the mysterious Glomar Explorer vessel. When the CIA learned of the robbery, panic seized Langley. The document was the piece that could connect all the dots, the loose thread that could unravel the most elaborate cover story ever created. Desperate to retrieve the memo before it fell into the wrong hands, the agency made a fateful decision. Instead of handling it internally, they pressured the FBI and the Los Angeles Police Department to treat the case as a top national security priority. This unusual pressure over a seemingly routine burglary was like throwing blood in the water for the sharks of the press. Investigative journalists, with their instinct for hidden stories, started asking questions. Why was the federal government so interested in a simple break-in? What was in those stolen documents that was so important? The CIA's own desperation to keep it secret was what finally put the bloodhounds on the trail. A human error, a mundane robbery, was becoming as great a threat as the mechanical failure at the bottom of the ocean. The world's best-kept secret was beginning to unravel, not because of Soviet spies, but because of a group of petty thieves and the curiosity of the free press. Despite the catastrophic failure of the Claw, the crew of the Glomar Explorer managed to bring up what was left of the submarine. It was a fraction of what they had hoped for, a mere 12-meter section of the bow. They hoisted it in complete secrecy inside the moon pool, away from the prying eyes of satellites and Soviet ships. Inside the recovered wreckage, they found the bodies of 6 Soviet sailors. In an act of unexpected respect in the midst of the Cold War, the American crew held a full military funeral on the ship's deck. They wrapped the bodies in shrouds, committed them to the sea to the sound of the Soviet and American anthems, and filmed the ceremony. It was a moment of shared humanity in the heart of the most ruthless of espionage operations. They also recovered 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes, which provided valuable intelligence on Soviet weaponry. But the grand prizes, the ballistic missiles, and, above all, the codebooks, were lost forever. The mission was over, an astonishing engineering achievement and a heartbreaking intelligence disappointment. The Glomar Explorer quietly withdrew, its secret, though damaged, still intact. But on land, the ticking time bomb of the stolen memo was about to explode. By early 1975, journalists from the Los Angeles Times, following the trail of the strange robbery, had pieced the puzzle together. They had the story. The director of the CIA, William Colby, in an act of unprecedented desperation, went to the newspaper's office in person and pleaded with the editor not to publish the story. He argued it would expose one of the most sensitive national security operations in history and jeopardize future missions. For a time, the newspaper agreed, but the story was too big to contain. In February 1975, the Los Angeles Times finally published the article, revealing to the world the incredible truth about the Hughes Glomar Explorer. Shortly after, investigative journalist Jack Anderson broadcast it to the nation on television. The secret was out. The $800 million cover-up crumbled under the weight of a single leak. The world was stunned. The story seemed torn from the pages of a spy novel. The revelation caused a media firestorm. Journalists hounded the CIA and the Pentagon for confirmation. And it was in response to this flood of questions that the U.S. government coined a phrase that would become as enduring a legacy as the operation itself. Pressed to confirm or deny the existence of Project Azorian, the CIA issued a carefully worded response. We can neither confirm nor deny. Thus, the Glomar response was born. It was a masterpiece of evasion, a verbal fog bank that allowed intelligence agencies to avoid lying while revealing no truth. It became a standard tool in the arsenal of espionage and politics, a phrase used ever since to protect state secrets around the world. Ironically, the most public legacy of history's most secret operation was a new way of saying nothing. With the cover story destroyed, any plans to go back for the rest of the submarine were abandoned. The operation was well and truly over. Project Azorian lives on in history as a paradox. It was a failure that fell short of its primary objectives, yet at the same time, it was one of the most astounding feats of engineering and intelligence ever attempted. It pushed the boundaries of deep-sea technology in ways no one thought possible, laying the groundwork for future exploration and undersea operations. The Hughes Glomar Explorer, the ship built for a heist, was stripped of its secret equipment and spent the rest of its life working in oil drilling. A mundane existence for a vessel with such an extraordinary past. Finally, in 2015, the steel giant was scrapped, its legend the only thing left afloat. Years later, in 1992, with the Cold War now an echo of history, CIA Director Robert Gates met with Russian President Boris Yeltsin. In a gesture of goodwill, Gates handed him a videotape. It was the recording of the funeral the Glomar Explorer crew had held for the 6 Soviet sailors on the high seas. It brought the story full circle, an act of respect that finally came out of the shadows, an acknowledgement that even in the darkest game of espionage, there were moments of shared honor. The story of Project Azorian is a testament to human audacity, a reminder that in the hunt for secrets, the greatest challenges sometimes come not from the enemy, but from the deep, unforgiving laws of physics and the unpredictable fragility of secrecy itself.